Okay. That's it. Podcast done. We said everything we needed to say.
Yeah, right. It's already too full.
So, hello, friends. You will be listening later to this. In this call, I have Dorian Das. I just met him 10 minutes ago and invited him for a podcast. And actually, we would plan it ahead, but I felt excited to actually start this podcast straight away because, um, yeah, just because. So here we are. Yeah, so who's Dorian Das? Well, I'm gonna give a little description of how I found him and what inspired me to invite him. I found him on Instagram a while ago, and ever since I've been following some amazing pointers, non-dual pointers, if you will, short, sweet captions of truth, and also some spoken word poetry, by the way, with some good silences in between. And it was very, very powerful. You know, you see a lot of things coming by online in the world of non-duality, whatever that still means these days. And what for me really stood out was a certain authenticity. And um, and when I saw his post where he said, "I'm not interested at all in any followers or money," I was like, "This guy is the real deal. Let's get him on the podcast and let's hear what he has to say, what he's like. Let's meet him." So here we are, me, myself, Thomas, Mathias, and Dorian Das. So welcome, brother. Good to have you.
Yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's good to be here.
Yeah. So um, yeah, maybe you can share a little bit about where all these beautiful pointers come from. What sparked the initial start of writing them and sharing them, and who are you on different levels?
Right. Um, I think after after the self was realized, I felt like a deep sort of desire to share what I had discovered myself with kind of whoever could come across it, really. Um, yeah, after after that discovery, they just the words, the pointers, the poetry just started to flow effortlessly. Like it was, I don't know, I can't really describe it. It just kind of felt natural and it came with ease.
That's beautiful. You know, a question that comes up, if I may interrupt, um, because this is very these teachings. I don't even like the word teaching. Let's cut that word.
Yeah,
But this whole topic of self-realization, it's very subtle.
yeah,
And I know that people that want to that there can be this tendency that it needs that people speak very correct about it, like there's nothing to realize, or you are
mm,
already self-realized, and you just said after the self was realized. So I thought that was interesting, and maybe you could tell us a little bit about the process. What was it like? Was there like a shift for you, a change in your experience? What are we talking about?
Yeah. So I feel like self-realization and like liberation are like sort of, there's like three stages. So at first, or I would say there's three stages to sort of identity cessation. So at the first level, I guess you could say, you realize that you're not your thoughts and you're not your feelings. At self-realization, you realize it's pretty much the identification with the body just dissolves. And in liberation, the mental activity of I, me, my is uprooted through repeated self attention. So after self realization, so after I realized that I was not the body, like not conceptually, but experientially, that's when the pointers and the poetry just started to flow. And sort of through that process, that led me to the deeper realization that I wasn't the doer, which I feel like is the final kind of thing that it's the final thing that collapses into wholeness.
Powerful. And makes me completely silent. um, Something came to mind when you were just speaking. Yeah, so if I speak from my personal experience and what I've heard, also teachers confirm, is that there can be these initial glimpses and periods of realization, and kind of people go kind of in and out of it. So it's not, so people are awakening, but it's not an abiding awakening. But the way you describe it, it sounds like it kind of um, it's quite stabilized. Is that your experience, that it's quite stabilized, that you don't shoot in and out of it, or how is
Yeah,
that for you?
I think after after the idea of personal doership collapses into boundless awareness, that is that's just the natural state. That's just permanent. It's the only thing, or it's the only no thing that's permanent within all impermanent experience.
And if someone is listening now and this person would be like, what the hell are they talking about? Permanent self, not a body. What would you say to this person? Because I can imagine that. Like, for me a few years ago, I would be like that. Like, what the hell? I don't get it at all.
I'd definitely say like a couple of years ago, I would have thought that I was crazy for saying some of this stuff. But what would I say? I would say stay true to your own direct experience.
Mm.
don't talk about something if it's not in your direct experience. If you don't know it experientially and you only know it conceptually, don't talk about it. Because that's exactly the thing. That's why I started sharing pointers and stuff like that, because when I knew these things conceptually, I would sort of share other people's spiritual quotes. And that was like the early stages of my page. But when I knew that for myself experientially, that's when I started to share from my own place of realization. So it felt more authentic and natural, and it was true for me because I discovered that for myself within myself. It wasn't borrowed from someone else. It was authentic from my own being.
You know, I think we live in very interesting times because, as you say, we can you shared pointers of teachers, and we have access to some very, very powerful teachings at
Yeah,
our
definitely.
fingertips. Um, so I imagine that must have played a big role in your process. Is that
Yeah.
correct? So how was that? There was a what usually the trajectory of a seeker is, they are suffering, we are traumatized, we don't know who we are, and the first we might seek in anything that is like a drug or a numbing thing, sex, drugs, alcohol, right? Or we get sparked that there might be something to be found within, and we go look for that. Could you share a little bit what feels relevant about this process for you? Where did you come from, and how did you start seeking, and what helped you?
Um, I would say the the seeking started after I had a near death experience when I was 20. I was living in Japan at the time and was training to be a canyoning guide, and we were doing a bit of swim training around the waterfalls and stuff like that, and it was really high water that day. So I was the first one to try to like go around. You got to go like around the rocks and then underneath the waterfall in this real narrow gap. And pretty much what happened was I just got slammed by the waterfall. I just boom straight under, like ragdolled. Didn't know which way was up or down. Was under there for like God knows how long.
Mm.
And at a certain point, this voice came and it said, I'm probably going to die now. And then there was just this peace, this just like overwhelming peace, and sort of feeling as though I was being held, because I wasn't resisting it. I just totally accepted that in that moment, that I was going to die right then and there. And just this peace just washed over me. And that was probably like maybe like a 10-second window. And I was like, oh no, wait, I want to live. And then I stuck my hand out of the water and my roommate grabbed it like straight away. It was like mad.
Wow.
But yeah, that was a that was a far out experience. I feel like that was like my first significant glimpse of silence.
Wow, that's really not so long ago.
Yeah, so that was 2 years ago from now. But yeah, after that experience, it was like, honestly, it was like next day, like I started meditating next day. It was so spontaneous.
Did you have an instruction or you just went sitting?
No, I just straight up, just like looked up everything about it and just started the next day.
Wow.
And that was the funniest thing, because like at the time I lived in a house with like 10 other people, and it was like a single room, and I shared it with another dude. So I had no space to do it. So I cleared out one of the closets in the house and made a little sitting spot there. Everyone was like laughing at me, like, "What are you doing, dude? Like, what the hell?" Everyone giving me weird looks. It's pretty crack out though. But
But
yeah,
that's interesting. So you had this experience and it was this deep silence, and afterwards you were like that was profound, and
yeah, that was
you made a
like,
link immediately between like this was some kind of meditation.
I mean, I think after that experience, I was kind of in shock at the fact, I was like, everyone was like telling me like, "Dude, you almost just died." Like, what? But yeah, I was kind of in shock from that. But yeah, next day, just watching, like, flat out watching all these spirituality videos, and just started practicing meditation straight away. Just, I don't know, it was just spontaneous, and just felt a really strong pull towards it.
And could you describe um uh I'm generally curious. You might have no style, but for anyone that's interested to meditate the way you do, because people say different things about meditation. What do you do when you sit down in meditation? What does it mean?
um I would recommend 3 practices that I've used and that have worked for me on different stages of the path. So, breath awareness is pretty simple. It's really all about attention. So wherever your attention is, that's sort of, it's bringing your attention to one thing to the exclusion of all else. So I started with the breath, just sitting in silence. And I did that. So from that period of starting, I did that practice for about 1 year. And that was daily in the morning for like 30 minutes. And then at that point, um, I'd picked up some other practices as well, but I don't know, like, I feel like you get to a point with practices, and like guilt and shame starts to come in. Like, the sense of being a person is still there, so you feel guilty for not doing the meditation, not doing the practices, not doing the yoga, pranayama, whatever. And at that point, there comes a willingness to just surrender or let go. And from there, I didn't drop that practice completely, but I would internally repeat the divine name. And so instead of bringing my attention to the breath, I'd devote my attention to the divine name, which was Shiva at the time. So internally in my heart, I would just repeat Shiva, Shiva. Whenever there was thoughts that would come, I would just Shiva, Shiva. It was kind of like home base, like coming back to the center, I guess you could say.
This was recommended by anyone, or there was just like your own natural response?
Yeah, it just it was just naturally picked up out of feeling of love and devotion for God, pretty much. But I feel like after reading the Gospel of Sri Ramakrishna, that like fully ignited my love and devotion for God.
Interesting. I didn't read that.
Yeah, I'd say Ramakrishna and Ramana Maharshi are like the two biggest impacts on me for sure.
Beautiful. Yeah.
Because one ignited love and devotion for God, and the other ignited attention to the self.
Right. And what does that love and devotion feel like or look like in day-to-day life? The love or devotion to God.
I would say your attitude changes over time. So I think the most mature or highest form of love and devotion to God is simply being as you are.
Beautiful.
It may start out with the invoking of his or her name and prayer and different forms of surrender and stuff like this, but the more, and that definitely, like, that was absolutely necessary for me to go through all of that to come to a more mature realization that simply being as you are is the highest devotion.
I notice I feel a sense of being impressed by the whole story and experience. It doesn't matter about age. You had your first glimpse at 20, and then all of this natural process started to unfold, and now at 22 it feels like an abiding realization, like the self is realized, and that's that, and it's beautiful, and I'm living. It feels like you kind of said, like, I'm living in a state of surrender and here-ness, nowness, and peace, something kind of unshakable. Where my experience, I am 27, started seeking when I was 21, had my first glimpse there in a Buddhist meditation retreat. But I can clearly tap into this experience, but I don't feel something abiding. I feel like I have work to do. I feel like my shadows still come up, my stuff. And even though I would love to stay there, I just feel like it's not happening yet. It's kind of work, but it's so unique, right? All of our experiences, and for everyone that's different. But do you have any element of 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 shadows or and personality stuff that comes up, or how is that for you?
Um,
Or are you the new Ramana Maharshi? And I don't mean that in any weird way, but like Ramana Maharshi
yeah,
was also famous for like having a very quick realization and kind of staying there from then onwards, you know? So it
I would
happens
say,
to people.
yeah, but no, definitely not. I'm not.
No,
I'm not the new Roman of my house.
no, I didn't try to get you claimed up, but you
But
get what I mean. You get what I mean.
yeah, I know what you mean. But it's interesting that you say that. There's so many young people that are abiding in the natural state that I have connected with on Instagram,
Mm.
like early 20s, like similar sort of story to me, I guess you could say. But to answer your question, yes, in the natural state, you do still have unpleasant thoughts and feelings and emotions, but you're not identified with them. So you know yourself as the unchanging space in which the thoughts, feelings, and emotions come and go.
And that never gets lost for you, where the draw is so strong that
Yeah,
it
well,
takes you over. It hijacks you again.
I would say once you're abiding in the natural state, that would not happen. But it's the pull of the habitual pull of personhood is so strong that like constant practice is needed to collapse the misidentification. Like that's where I feel like there was like for me, I had that like year period of every single day wake up, I don't know, like do the cold shower, um, do yoga, breath work, and then meditation, all before I've even had breakfast. So I've had that, but I've had that year of practice, but ultimately I was still suffering
Mm.
because I was still in a state of being a person who was doing the practices. And there was still guilt and shame when I didn't do the practices. But then you come to a point where you realize the only way that suffering is going to end is if you surrender. Not just like a one time thing, but like a continuous, repeated, repeated surrender over and over, constantly letting go throughout your daily life. And it's not like you're constantly like bowing down or anything. It's not that kind of surrender. It's more like giving up control, observing without trying to change anything.
Um, and how would you say, balance this out with preference, with living a somewhat normal human life? Right there, there's a you could get as far to a point as where eating doesn't even matter anymore, right? But where is that balance for you? How would one find that?
I would say it's not so much an outside job. Like, daily life isn't the thing that's making you suffer. It's where your attention is inwardly. So is your attention abiding in silence? Or is it sort of getting pulled and pushed around by the mental activity of I, me, my?
Mm.
That's ultimately like what it comes down to, is because that's what surrender actually is letting go from the mental activity of I, me, my, and inverting it into the silence of being. That's what true surrender is. Because in that, there's no room for personal will. When one inverts their attention into the source, you see through personal will. And the divine will alone remains.
There's a there's an element of trust that comes with that,
Definitely.
like a
That's a
deep trust.
huge one. Trust, like, if you could, like, if there was one word you could tell anyone on that's on the path, that's it. Trust.
That's beautiful. You know, actually, it's funny because um, I feel like I'm learning a lot. I thought I would meet you and I would meet someone that I would probably connect more onto also these um, maybe doubts that are still there, because I experience certain doubts. I experience glimpses and shifts, but it's, as I said, there's a sometimes a sense of being hijacked, and then there's a sense of
Right.
freedom. But actually, uh, I hear you, and I'm learning from it, and it's so interesting because I sense that myself, that there's this feeling of, do I fully trust that, or should I kind of should that I kind of stay a little bit in the mix, you know, manipulating the show a little bit. Yeah. It's funny, actually. I had an experience the other week on mushrooms. which
Oh,
I
okay.
went into ceremonially. And I had this experience where I started to, I took almost a heroic dose, which is I took 4 grams fasted while someone was
Well,
holding space for me. Um, and the experience was that at first I started shivering, and then I started laughing like ridiculously, and then I
right, like
started
hysterically.
and then I started cathartically crying, like
Mm.
as I never cried before. And then I my but all of this could only be invoked by me entering a deep state of surrender and rest, because the mushrooms came on so strong that I cannot control this. Like if I'm gonna resist this experience, it's gonna be very, very tough, So there was this deep awareness, like I can only surrender. So, and my body was entering this deep state of rest, like really slow breathing. And at some point my breathing got so slow that I for a moment thought that my breathing stopped. And I wasn't sure if I was gonna if I had to control it again. Because I thought I might die, you know. Maybe this mushroom dose was so strong. And what I experienced then was like a kind of a surrender to that. Like if I need to die right now, then that is
Yeah,
fine. But I also really trust that Mother Nature takes care of my breath, or whatever you want to call it, God,
yeah, yeah.
Ishvara.
I like Mother as well because
Yeah. And
it's
and
like,
and, and but this was for me one of the deepest senses of trust I have felt in a while.
mm,
Yeah.
yeah, trust to me is the highest form of love,
Mm,
because you can say like, oh, lovey, it's like, oh, lovey dovey, but like trust is like unconditional, just
mm,
flat out. If it's not unconditional, it's not trust.
mm. So this trust that any experience that is given is right. That there's a kind of a, but would you say that has an element of some higher intelligence having a plan for you?
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
There is a higher power,
Right.
100%.
Right. With a plan guiding you. Because people have all sorts of theories, right? All sorts of people that have deep abiding awakenings say very different things sometimes.
Yeah, like you can realize the nature of reality, but the way in which you came to that realization is the way that you're going to perceive that or express that. So, like for myself, I came to the realization of the nature of reality through love and devotion. But maybe someone else that comes to that same exact realization comes to it through self inquiry.
That was not your path. I'm surprised
No,
to hear that.
that's the thing. That's the thing that's crazy, is that I've never practiced self inquiry once.
Wow.
It never interested me at all. Totally uninterested. Or it pretty much for me, it went from devotion to the divine name to straight to self attention,
Mm,
because the divine name was, it's the exact same thing as inquiry pretty much. It's pointing to that which is beyond thought.
sure.
It's just a it's a reorientation of your awareness. Your awareness isn't invested in the mental activity of I, me, my. It reorients itself back to its natural standpoint, I guess you could say. It's not entangled in anything. It just this open space. But yeah, those are the same tools. Like the divine name and self-inquiry are just pointing to what's beyond it.
And do you feel that there is um, I feel it remains a choice, really, after you've after you've kind of lost all your sense of distance and time and location. I feel if you've pierced through that, because that's a pretty deep one, if you start to see this. But my experience is that it's still a choice. Like, what do I give my attention to? Right? And it's not like temptations are gone. Don't you feel tempted by things in the world? Even it's just something as simple as a phone and scrolling for too long on it, and you know it's good for you, you know?
Right. So you're asking whether there's choice?
Well, I would love you to expand on that. What I asked you is, yeah, I was speaking from a sense of choice, but maybe you have a completely different answer to that.
It really depends on where you're at, eh? From the perspective of the person or personal doership, yeah, there's choice. I can choose to have a glass of water or an orange juice. But from the absolute perspective, there is no choice.
Right.
And that's where the surrender comes in. Because choice is just saying I am in control of life. Whereas life is actually in control of you. It's just a slight shift.
So you say there's no free will.
I don't I don't particularly call it. I wouldn't call it. I think I prefer to use personal will, not free will. There's no personal will. There's only divine will.
So what do you mean by the difference between personal will and divine will, or free will, personal will?
I would say that personal will is when you think that you are the doer of actions and you believe yourself to be a separate individual. Divine will is what is, or what's happening.
I've heard theories from respected teachers that, and I find this, I have absolutely, well, if I've had conversations with people about this, and some people that are deep on this path that are absolutely certain that there's free will. They believe in that, and others that say no, there's absolutely no free will. I kind of came to the conclusion I have no idea. It seems like it.
Yeah, that's the thing. That's what I was saying before. Don't talk about anything that's not within your direct experience.
Right. So yeah, so I have no idea whether there's free will or not. What it seems like, but I know that can also be just an illusion. That's what I know. So that's why I know
Yeah.
I can claim it. What it seems like is that I am claiming kind of my free will, the more quote unquote aware I become. Like there's this moment of waking up from being completely identified with everything you think. So whatever someone does, whether it's something positive or something that you perceive as positive or negative, you just react with either laughter or whatever, anger, you know. And then there's this moment where you become aware of all of these reactions that happen internally, and there's seemingly this choice becomes freed up, if you can say it like that in English. Like, okay, I can see the thought, I can see the emotion it sparks. Do I want to go with it? Does this serve something that I value? You know,
Hmm.
and so I feel I'm coming here from a completely different place in the way I approach life if I hear you speak, because I kind of, and maybe there's a shift waiting for me still, but I kind of have like this kind of values and virtues I live by, kind of like I filter. Like I sometimes take my thoughts and I see like, what is this in service to that which I value, and there's a mental process, and then there's the seeming choice. But you would say all of that is the divine will.
Yeah.
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 Man.
It's when you're identified with the person, it seems absolutely real. But when the person collapses into presence, the illusion is seen through. There's a deep, unshakable clarity there. Because that's pretty much what the person is. And when I say the person, people call it the, I don't really like using the word the ego because there's so much conditioning and concepts around that are not true. And no one really knows what they're talking about when they use that word.
Everyone has a
But
different definition of it as well.
yeah.
Yeah.
So what I mean when I say the person is I'm referring to the mental activity of I, me, my. The
Something on
notion.
behalf of a separate self
Yeah, exactly.
that needs to be
That's what I
protected.
love. Those are the two words that I love to use: the mental person and the separate self. Those two, for me, directly point to what it actually is. And what the person actually is the impulse to control what's happening. So long as there is the impulse to control what's happening, there's no surrender. So that's what it is. It's constantly letting go of control and resting as unchanging presence.
Which paradoxically still looks like activity. Paradoxical to the separate self. Right? Because like you work and you do things, and there's preference, right? So no control. Like people that go for at this from a very mental perspective. There's this term. It's known as the Advaita Shuffle. Have you heard of that?
No, I don't think I have.
So, for example, imagine people standing in line for the grocery store, and then someone decides to stand in front of someone else. Then this person could be blamed, like, hey, don't stand in front of me. and you could like kind of argue that it's not in my control, like I'm now here, you know.
Yo, that straight up, that is spiritual bypassing.
Right.
It's not
right.
taking responsibility.
I love that you brought up that term, because I think it's very important, because especially like Advaita, it's very or non-duality, it's very appealing to the mind, to intellectual minds, and it can easily become a bypass. So how does one that doesn't abide yet in awakening prevent themselves, or maybe that's not even the point to prevent, but you get where I'm going. How to deal with this, how to not get into bypassing.
I keep coming back to that same thing, like stay true to your direct experience. Don't speak about something that is not your direct experience right here and now. And
don't say you're free when you're not free.
Yeah, it's like if it's a concept for you, that's great, but experiential understanding is what true freedom is. Freedom isn't conceptual.
So don't say it was out of your control to stand in front of the line at the grocery store, because your direct experience was that it was your choice.
Yeah, exactly. It's kind of like, how can I spiritual bypassing is just pretty much, how can I not be responsible? I feel like freedom actually you have to be extremely responsible while knowing what you are at the same time. So you play in it, but you're not of it.
Mm-hmm. It's
like
that's a powerful sentence. This responsibility. But maybe you want to add something. I don't want to interrupt you.
No, it's fine. Yeah. Play the human play, dance the human dance, but know that you're free from it all. So be in it, like Jesus said, be in the world, but not of the world. You can be in the person, but not be of the person. Because right now, it probably seems like I'm just an ordinary person, right? I'm functioning as anyone else would. But that's the difference. When realization is really mature, or is permanent abidance, the person isn't an identity. It's used as a function to interact with the world.
Right, beautiful.
Like the ego isn't, or the ego of the person isn't a bad thing. It's necessary. Not as an identity, though. As a function. That presence uses the person as a function to interact with the world.
That was the gold, I think, and what you just said.
It's not a bad thing. The very fact that you want to get rid of it is the ego, is the person. Presence doesn't have any problems with being unconditionally human.
Has there been a reorientation been in how you how the person, the ego, is, for lack of a better word, used for something beautiful in service to?
Yeah, I feel like the reorientation is from the person as an identity to the person as a function.
But I meant, and maybe in a bit more practical sense. But like you said, your job, you work at a caretaker.
I'm a support worker at a disability center.
Right. That sounds like beautiful work. I
Yeah,
can imagine that feels very much in line with what you know. Capital K, no.
It's super rewarding, eh?
Beautiful. Powerful stuff, brother. Thank you for sharing all of this. And
yeah, you're welcome, man.
I feel it's really valuable. This conversation as well can be for people. And one last question. I think you had an amazing piece of poetry on your feed. Spoken word poetry. If you feel like it, don't feel obliged. But would you like to share some spoken word poetry?
Yeah, sure. Which one are you talking about?
What was it again? It was something. I think it was. You only have a few videos, I think. I think it was a playground.
Oh,
It's still
Playground Unbroken.
playground.
Oh yeah. Hold up. Do you want me to pull it up?
Or maybe you feel inspired to share another one.
Oh, okay. I think I got a few in here. Let me have a look.
Maybe something new.
Yeah, something that I haven't shared before. Oh, yo, I got one. I'll pull through. All right. I am stiller than the depths of the ocean. There's no potion. Just get rid of all false notion. Oh shit. I be ice cold frozen while appearing in motion. Like a movie on the screen of pure consciousness, misperception leads to mad consequence and causes you to lose confidence. When you see with eyes clean like a light beam, the world ain't what it seems. It's a dream. You're the cream of the crop acting like a drop. Be not mistaken, my dear friend, awaken.
Boom. I love that.
Thank you.
If I can speak out of personal preference, I would love to see more of your spoken word poetry. I think they're amazing. I
Thank
really
you.
love them. Yeah.
I got a few in there, so I really gotta get some videos going.
Yeah. Well, beautiful, brother. Thank you so much for sharing your story and for being on here, your first podcast.
Yeah,
Isn't it,
but this is like my first thing
Zoom
ever,
call?
man. Just made the Zoom account for this, bro.
Amazing. Yeah, no, thank you. Thank you.
Yeah. Thanks so much for having me on here, man.
If you want to find Dorian, you can find him at Dorian Das. Just that, right?
Yeah. Oh, Dorian Das 47 on
Dorian
Instagram.
Das 47 on Instagram. So I highly recommend you to check it out. And I'm gonna say see you in the next one, next podcast. Thank you, brother.
Sounds good, bro.